Why would you want to leave Key West?
That's a really good question. Key West is just an interesting place. It's completely cut off from the rest of the world.
In a magical way.
In a magical way, and they really believe, and you start to feel when you're down there that there is no other. There's just Key West, and you're on your days off. You're already in paradise, so it's pretty cool. And the actual story is I was working at a bar, standing behind the bar one day, and I was talking to a lead waitress there, and she was in her mid-40s, and I was like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And she's like, well, I just came down here in my 20s, and I'm still here. So I was like,
oh. What does the Senior Vice President of Capital Markets have in common with the Director and Producer of Hip Hop Music? We're going to let Bobby Wolfe explain this. He is the Senior VP of Capital Markets at USA Mortgage. How did you get this start in hip hop? And then we'll fast forward.
Right, that was a lifetime ago. I was living in Key West. Not doing much down there, and my best friend, who I knew growing up, we played football together in high school, was a hip hop artist in Austin trying to get his career off the ground, and he said, hey man, come up here and help me. So put the dog in the car, drove to Austin, and spent the next 6 or 7 years working and helping him get his career off the ground. He was the first hip hop artist to really break into live bands, live music in Austin and the bar scene there. He was inducted into the Austin Music Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. We did a whole college circuit. I got to write songs for him and help produce music. So it was a whole section of my life that would not have happened if not for my best friend. So
that's pretty cool.
I thank him for that.
I want to digress for a second. You lived in Key West, and you almost made the comment that you wanted to get out. Why would you want to leave Key West?
That's a really good question. Key West is just an interesting place. It's completely cut off from the rest of the world.
In a magical way.
In a magical way, and they really believe, and you start to feel when you're down there that there is no other. There's just Key West, and you're on your days off. You're already in paradise, so it's pretty cool. And the actual story is I was working at a bar, standing behind the bar one day, and I was talking to a lead waitress there, and she was in her mid-40s, and I was like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And she's like, well, I just came down here in my 20s, and I'm still here. So I was like, oh, man, I got to get out. I was worried. It really worried me.
Which bar?
And I looked around, and it was actually it was a restaurant it was a beautiful restaurant. It's called Martha's Seafood and Steakhouse out by the airport, and it has ceiling to floor. You could watch the sunset
cool.
during dinner. It was really cool. But yeah,
but you weren't on Duval Street then, so you were like off the beaten path.
My first place down there was about 3 streets off of Duval. So we lived in an old house on the 2nd and 3rd story.
So had I not introed and talked about this to begin with, Key West bartender, producer of hip hop music, and then the obvious segue into the mortgage industry as director or senior VP of capital markets. So the first question I have is, what the hell does that even mean?
Well, I met my wife-to-be down in Austin, and she's thought she'd had enough of the 4 in the morning and the hip-hop scene and all what I was doing. So moved back to St. Louis, went back to business school, and the rest is history.
So for those that aren't familiar with our industry, or maybe it's a real estate agent watching this, what does that title mean? Like, what do you do?
Oh, got you. Senior VP of Capital Markets. So it really is a varied topic depending on the company you work for. For me, here I handle all of our pricing. So we price dynamically to 50 states, including DC. So that's fun and a challenge. And then we also have to sell all the mortgages on the secondary market to aggregators and to agencies. So I price on the front end and I sell on the back end.
In layman's terms, you control the rates.
Yeah, the Fed controls the rates. I wish I did. I really do. I spend a lot of time trying to unwind what the Fed's doing so that everyone can actually sell their loans, and try to help everyone in their own markets figure out the sweet spots, figure out how to price better, figure out what the products work best, and then get prices on the street where we can keep the lights on and the borrowers can be happy.
So it's a lot to unpack, this particular topic, and I want to keep this relatively simple. There's a lot of probably podcasts around our industry that get super deep on this stuff, and anybody who knows me knows that I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer when it comes to this stuff. So I'm going to ask you the questions like a layman would, like the unsharp knives out there in the world. No offense to anybody listening, but it's a competitive market. It's a competitive industry, and there's a lot of chatter between company to company. My rates are better, your rates are better, or from a real estate agent and borrowers that are going back to the realtors and their rate's better than their rate. And why the discrepancy or disparity from company to company if we're all ultimately selling to the same banks?
Well, we really aren't. There's really a split there, because the depositories aren't. They don't have to sell into the secondary market. So that's where you get into competitive environments like now, where a bank can offer a better ARM rate than, say, a private mortgage bank. When I say a bank, a depository. And that's because they have their own deposits, and they can literally set a rate, and as long as they can make money off of the overnight rates, then they can just hold that loan on their portfolio and not sell it. A private mortgage bank doesn't have deposits, so they have to sell into the secondary market. So then you become a bank that has to deal with what that market is, what the financial institutions, where they're pricing the securities, and because the aggregators who are buying from us are then securitizing and selling them on to Wall Street. So you're stuck in that dichotomy if you're a mortgage bank. And that's where all of the private mortgage banks are fairly similar. Then you get into size, because the aggregators will give better rates possibly, or better rate sheets to bigger mortgage banks who are going to sell more to them. They definitely reward for quality and for volume. But when you get to a fairly large private mortgage bank, the difference in the rate sheets that you're receiving from the aggregators are going to be very similar, maybe 10, 15 bips difference. And then it really depends on how you operate and how you decide to price with your own margins within different markets.
Yeah. You mentioned the word bips, which is basis points. 10 to 15 bips is what you said the difference might be. Is there any impact on rate from 10 to 15 bips?
No, 10 to 15, I mean, it's possible. It really depends. The rule of law, kind of going back to a normal environment, 50 basis points, and a basis point is a percent of a percent, so 1% of 1%.
That's not complicated.
Is 1 basis point. But, usually the general rule of thumb is about 50 basis points will move you an eighth in rate. That'll vary depending on where you are on a rate band.
So you had mentioned in the beginning there of this conversation about how banks arguably have an advantage, but it doesn't. As somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, anybody who's been around this industry kind of knows that, a lot of consumers, real estate agents, don't necessarily go to that hometown bank or go to that local bank, but yet they have this advantage, at least the way you described it. Why do you think that is? Why have mortgage banks become so dominant in this industry over a local bank who can offer a better rate?
Of course, just my opinion. The local banks are going to be more choosy because they're really looking for customers. They use the mortgage to draw in customers.
Deposits.
Okay. And a private mortgage bank is going to be trying to do originations. They want to help all the borrowers. Now there are rules around being a bank and being in a footprint and having to lend a certain amount to all borrowers, but they're generally, in my opinion, are looking for more customers. And so this advantage I mentioned really is because of this environment where short-term rates, it's an inverted yield curve, so short-term rates have been raised so fast that the private mortgage banks are kind of waiting for that to normalize, and then ARM pricing will come back. Banks know this, so that is an advantage they have, and they'll use that, 6% ARM right now that we can't get our hands on to get a customer.
Sure, yeah, to get their deposits potentially. Yeah. So now I think as we've been talking here for about 8 or 9 minutes, you understand why he is the vice president of capital markets. So I want to ask you a couple of questions as it relates specifically to the industry, which is, again, there is a disparity. Not every mortgage bank or bank has the exact same rate. It varies, and it can vary from an economic time. Like during COVID, there was a lot more turning up. I always call it turning the spigot. You're turning the spigot on where you want your rates, and there was obviously some conspiracies, and probably true, that banks were turning up the spigot. In other words, because they wanted to slow down volume, because it was so busy, and because they could get greedy. And then you've got the completely opposite, where the last couple of years have gotten hyper competitive with the Fed raising rates, and then low inventory, which means there's no business. People are shutting their doors, and so the desperate times call for turning the spigot down. Why does I want to ask you from just a general perspective, and you in your role at this company, do they make a practice of turning the spigot on a consistent basis based upon when they can get it, when they can't get it, and what are your thoughts on that, just that practice in general?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's complicated because there's so many private mortgage banks, not to mention depositories, in addition to that, and they all have different approaches. There is absolutely, I came from a very large bank who, when volume got too high, they definitely turned the margins up to slow it down. That was because their operation shop was just completely choking on the volume. We had SWAT teams in the cafeteria, things like that, and in order to keep their customers from getting angry with them, their general bigger bank customers from getting angry with them, they would just turn up the spigot, turn rates up, and then the borrowers just would go somewhere else. There's other places that absolutely will not do that. They'll take advantage of that, and they'll turn the spigot down, or they'll just say, you know what, we're just going to fight through this and keep doing originations. But there's just so many different variations on what price, how you price, and what can be a price. A lot of people will look real close in their own market and kind of try to tweak to maximize their return but keep their borrowers happy. And that could be very different in say California than to Texas. And then there's other things that affect pricing also, which from a securitization standpoint or from the servicer standpoint, where they're really focused on whether or not that borrower is going to refinance quickly. So the servicing values can vary. So you might have a higher servicing value in Texas where loans aren't going to refinance as quick compared to California, where they really expect things to kind of turn over and over and over.
Yeah. Does this company practice the turning of the spigot consistently, or do they pretty much hold steady?
This company, it's amazing. This company will take in as much volume as they can. We don't turn it up. We do price dynamically to different regions. We look at every region, specifically. We have
like a geographic region.
Geographic region, yes, by state and by geography. We have regional leaders, as you know, and they all have autonomy to kind of approach their regions how they want.
Yep.
So I work individually with each one of them just to make sure that what the pricing we have in that region makes sense to not only to the regional but to the borrowers and the loan officers.
It's a great segue, because I was going to ask you that next, which is so for anybody in the industry understanding how this works, you've got companies where the company just controls it and you really don't have any say. There's companies that say you have control of it, but that's arguable. And then you've got more autonomous companies like this, which is more of a true P&L setup, and we'll talk about that on another episode. But how you mentioned regionals, and in some cases area, in some cases even branch managers have the control to control those margins. And it's an interesting conversation, because I've had many of these conversations with prospective leaders, prospective candidates who want to learn more. And it's always I want to have the best rate in town. I want to have the ability to just have the best rate, and they don't understand the dynamic of how expensive it can be and how quickly you can go underwater. And so as we talk to that, and maybe a prospective branch or leader comes in and kind of has that mentality, kind of how are you walking them through the setup of their margins so that A, they don't price themselves out of the market, and B, they don't price their P&L into the trash?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a conversation we have with every prospect. They've always come through pricing. Our president always makes sure they talk to me because we definitely approach things differently. A lot of these LOs come from companies that will show one price, one product. And when you do that, you're kind of taking all of the pricing, you're taking all of the autonomy and transparency out of the LO's hands, and you're just saying this is it. And what that is they're taking all the aggregator pricing and they're kind of putting it all into one. So you're getting kind of the average of the whole. What we like to do here is we like to put that power back into the hands of the loan officers, let them get more familiar with our investors. We have over 20 approved investors that we work with, in addition to Fannie and Freddie. And we like to put that pricing in front of them. They have to be smarter. You have to become better, I think, here, because you have to learn how to see how these investors move in and out, and they do. They, just like us, they have their own opinions of what they want, their own appetites. Yeah. Some like larger loan sizes today and smaller loan sizes tomorrow, and for whatever reason, or some like, they go after loans in certain areas for some reason or another. And if you don't show all of that, the LOs don't get to see that moving in and out. They don't get to see the investors and how they dynamically price. And I think when you show it like we do, you get more trust. You have more transparency.
Yeah. In other words, and we use Optimal Blue, which allows the loan officer to see all of these different investors. So that versus a company who just shows one rate, right. Maybe they have a proprietary pricing engine. It's easier for them to manipulate where the rate is potentially. Not saying that's what they do, but that's the perception. Yeah. And if you can see all of the investors, if I understood you correctly, it creates more transparency.
More transparency in my mind. I mean, there's investors today, for instance, that are getting what we call specified payups. So they're giving more money for lower loan sizes because they believe, when this market turns, they think it's going to turn fast, and they think all of the higher loan amounts are going to refi the quickest, and the ones with lower loan amounts are going to stay on their books. So they're actually paying for that. Well, if you have one rate, then the company kind of takes that advantage to themselves. The LO sees the one rate, but here you can see it. We actually let the division that the investor puts out. They put out 10 different products based on loan size for just their one conforming 30-year. You see all that, so you'll see that pricing coming in and out. You'll see when they have that appetite. And again, you have to be smarter, I think, here to be able to kind of manipulate that and look at it.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, $1 million question. 2024 is going to be an election year. That can mean a lot of things. What is your prediction for what interest rates will do in 2024, keeping in mind that we're coming out of a year where we saw 10-year highs?
Right. I wish I had a crystal ball. I'm not going to back away from the question, but I'll tell you, it's an impossible question because really the Fed kind of controls the flow of things. And I was kind of a doubter when they talked about the COVID money and that flowing into the market, creating all of this inflation. I kind of was a doubter of that, but I'm really not anymore. I mean, it's almost like from a macro level, you really see it. So it really kind of upsets me as a person that works in the industry to watch them kind of create a problem and then do such a drastic response to their own problem by raising rates so high to try to turn that spigot off, which is a spigot they turned on. And I don't think they realize, it's not just the borrowers, it's not just the LOs, it's everyone in the industry that feels the pain. The people in the back office, the people in the front, and mostly the borrowers who are now having trouble affording homes. So, what do I think is going to happen as a reaction now from that? Is I personally think, again, just my opinion, that I think people are worse off than it looks. I think that the money's still being spent, but people are blowing through their savings, they're blowing through their 401k, they're doing things that they wouldn't do because they've created a habit that wasn't natural and that they're having trouble turning off. So I think when that realization comes around next year, early next year, that people really are in worse shape than we think, then they're going to have to start lowering rates. I think that. But that being said, if they're watching inflation, that's a problem because they back themselves into a corner. You drop rates, what happens? Housing prices go up, inflation comes. If you don't drop rates, what happens? Rents go up, inflation. So they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. So that's where I'm going to say, I don't really know, but I think they're going to have to come down.
You don't, and that's obviously you don't have a crystal ball. So, but if I had to say, take a guess. What's your guess if we're playing a game? It's a Christmas party. you've got to throw that dart against the wall. What are you aiming for? Where do you think? What range?
Yeah.
Do you think rates could potentially go to? Are they going to stay between 7 and 8? Could they get to 6 to 7, 5 to 6? What do you think?
Well, again, for 3 or 4 years, we said rates have to go up, right? We kept rates have to go up. They didn't. Rates have to go up. They didn't. If you kept asking me, I kept saying they're going to go up, right? Now I'm thinking rates have to go down, but I don't think they're going down. I think, I would take, at this point, I'd take 6s and 7s almost, low 7s, high 6s, anything. But I feel like there has to be some relief. I don't see it going back to where it was in 2020 or 21, but I just don't know how they continue to stay high.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's what everybody's hoping for, Bobby. I think they're hoping for you to say 5s, but you don't know.
I would love 5s. I would love 5s. I would even just that. That does,
Sure.
and that's where rates were when I started 20-something years ago.
Really?
It's crazy.
Really? Yeah.
I can remember my first mortgage being about 5 1/4, and that seemed
That was pretty low for 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I started in 2000, and they were 8, 7s, 8s, and I even saw some subprime in the 10s.
This was probably 03, 04, 05 that I'm thinking.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's I would kill for that now. Something that didn't sound so great,
All right, so just some personal questions because I portrayed you as super cool in the beginning, then you went super nerdy on me because it's just the way we have to go. You have a family? Married? You already mentioned.
I do. I have a wife. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I got 2 kids. My daughter just started college, and my son is a avid football player. He's a sophomore in high school.
Awesome. Where's your daughter in college?
She goes to Webster University here in St. Louis.
I'm an alum.
Nice.
How about that? All right.
She loves it.
Very cool.
She's on campus.
If you could move anywhere as soon as your kids are out of the house, where are you and your wife moving?
Most likely, we'd like to go to Colorado. I spent some time there. She went to Colorado State. I spent some time there. Before I moved to Key West, I lived in Boulder, so you can just follow me around the country. But I just think it's beautiful there, and it's. I think that's where we'd like to end up.
So I'm a genie, and I can grant that wish, but you could pick. You got to pick one town. Where are you going?
That's a tough one. That I don't know enough. I lived in Boulder. My sister lives in Denver. I think that I know that
you can pick
there's
a mountain
some glitter
town.
spots. I would personally probably pick a mountain town, but I have a feeling we'd end up in
Which one?
some outlier
Which one? This is a fantasy here.
I like Winter Park.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Somewhere around there, in those
all right.
mountain areas. I love the lakes up there. It's beautiful.
Are you a skier or snowboarder?
I'm a skier, but I'm not that good. My son loves to ski, so he's going. My sister-in-law is out in Steamboat, so he's going to be out there skiing in a few weeks.
Beer or liquor or neither?
It depends on. I'm an old bartender, so when in Rome, lately I've been love to drink whiskey. Sapphire Gin's one of my favorites, but I will sit down and have a beer with you any day.
I always ask that question because anybody watching this, especially if you work at USA or you're prospectively coming to USA and you want to kiss his ass, that's how you do it.
Whiskey
Bobby,
always works.
I appreciate you, dude. This was fun, man. We'll have to do this
good.
again.
I enjoyed
man.
it, Jeff.
Take
I really
care.
appreciate it.